We're here in Amsterdam at the Next Web. It feels like a festival actually, and we're here with Kary. And I actually forgot about the last name, so maybe.
Kary Bheemaiah.
All right. So the first introduction is actually what do you do here? You just had an interesting talk here.
Yeah, so I just gave a talk on how to measure the intrinsic value of a token. This is something that I've been doing with a couple of colleagues from the Money by Design project. We've been working on it for a few months now. And one of the big issues that's going on right now in the crypto space is a lot of the value of tokens is based on speculation, which makes it extremely susceptible to volatility. So, you can go to sleep one day and your token's valued at $100. You wake up the next morning and it's down to zero. So it destroys a lot of value. And this is not a new problem. This has been going on since we first started investing in stocks. And back in 1934, Benjamin Graham had figured out a way to measure the intrinsic value of a stock. So we kind of asked ourselves the question, can we do the same thing for a token? Because that gives you like a guideline. Now you can figure out, okay, fine, where does speculation end and where's it going off? So that's mostly what I spoke about today, and I can speak about it in more detail if you want.
Yeah, so actually the intrinsic value of the token, I mean, you have got the utility tokens, security tokens, I mean, you got lots of sort of tokens, and actually one of the things you said is the amount of users is very decisive, huh?
Yeah. So you can have different kinds of tokens, I've mostly focused on utility tokens because I think a token should be there because it's trying to do something at the same time. It's not supposed to be just some kind of store of value. It needs to be a medium of exchange. It's doing a certain function in order to get a business going on. And when you look at all these different kinds of tokens, you can still generalize them to a certain extent because a token at the end of the day is a proxy for a value of a network. It's a unit proxy for a value of a network. And whatever kind of token that you've got going on doesn't make a difference because it's still on a network. So we started to figure out if you can measure a stock through fundamental aspects of a business, why can't you do the same thing for a token based on fundamental aspects of a network? And that's how we got into investigating about Metcalfe's law, which was our base source of information. And then we used another couple of other sciences, a little bit of more research that has been done recently, put it all together and came up with this new way of which we can price a token for an intrinsic value of a token at least.
So actually you designed a model, eh? What some people say from the traditional world, they say, yeah, there's no fundamental value, there's no, where can I do the fundamental analysis of these new crypto space?
Okay, so if you're using any kind of exchange network, so you have a network in which people are exchanging something. The moment that you exchange something, that means that there is value accredited to it. Otherwise, why would you exchange, right? So there is obviously that aspect over there. So you don't have to make this super complicated. You go for the basics. And when we looked at networks, we said, okay, fine, people are exchanging either information, with blockchains exchanging value, different types of value. So if you look at those fundamentals, then you realize that there are two things which are very, very important. The first is the size of the network. The size of the network shows that, yeah, there's more and more people interested in it. And that's why we're very focused on network effects, which I like to call word of mouth with benefits. Because I tell you, come and join this certain network because I know that if you do that, then the value of the network's going up, both of us are going to profit from it. So size of the network's really important. That's what Metcalfe's law helped us do.
You had a very interesting slide, like for more than a million users. Actually, the token is more than 1,500 euros.
It's very, very low price. So the second aspect that we looked at was connectivity. And connectivity is really important because when you look at the way that people exchange value, they don't do it with everyone. So if you and I are on a network, we're not going to exchange value with everyone on the network. We're going to do it with a certain number of people. And this is the case in any social network. Yeah, so that's Dunbar's number, and we kind of use that as a reference because it gave us like an upper limit. And so what we did was we modified Metcalfe's law, came up with a different version of it, you could say, adapted version of it, and then said that, okay, fine, now you can have a base formula for pricing a token's intrinsic value. And I specify the separation between intrinsic value and speculative value. Markets will set the true price of any asset. But if you can separate the intrinsic from the speculative, you can make a much more educated kind of a guess as to what the price should be.
It's also quite handy for ICOs itself. I know a couple of Dutch ICOs that they say, okay, this is the intrinsic value of our token, and like, okay, where is it based on?
Prove it. Yeah, exactly, and that's the point because we are in the process of kind of creating our own ICO. We're right now in the pre-funding stage, so we're going out and we need people to help us build this right now before we can do an actual ICO. And we came across this problem ourselves. How many tokens should we create? What's the value of it? Why are we pricing it this way? And when we started asking these questions, that's when we realized that today a lot of tokens, the value of the token, irrespective of how good the business is, it can get completely destroyed by speculation. So one of the slides that I showed was the pump and dump schemes. And that is, I call it like cowboy capitalism on steroids. No one gives any consideration as to what exactly is going on over there. They're just pumping and dumping this thing because you can do it, you can make a quick buck. Yeah. So what we have been able to do through our work is to say that based on the number of users and the connectivity, this is what the normal value should be. All right? And now if you want to speculate on top of it, at least you've got a reference line that you can kind of look to and say, okay, fine, am I going up? Am I going down? What's happening over here? So it's a control mechanism more than anything else.
So for the private investors, it's quite a handful, actually, for the ICOs itself. So are you looking also to consult these ICOs? Or, I mean, this model is value.
It's very, very general. That's the reason why we're publishing all our work. You can already go on moneybydesign.io and download the investor model.
Open source, actually.
Yeah, so that information's out there because we want to show people that, yeah, we've been able to do it, and we've got a simulation that helps us show it. We're not saying that we know all the answers. There's obviously, modifications and adjustments and improvements that can be made. And the best way to do that is to use the community. There's a lot of very smart people out there. So we're putting this information out there. You want to disagree with us, go ahead. You want to correct us, go ahead, no problem. The ultimate aim should be, how can we start having a mature relationship with ICOs? How can we start using ICOs as a new investment model and do it in a way that feels like there's an adult in the room, which is not the case today because there's just too much speculation and volatility.
Sounds good. So actually, what are the next steps? Because now you're like a corporation, a group of people working on this project. So
the next steps are essentially we're trying to get more and more private funding because we need to build a certain amount of salient features, you could say, before we can go out to the world and say, here, we're doing an ICO. So we've got some private investors already contacting us. We've been in contact with the World Bank, with the IMF.
Based in Paris. Huh?
We are based in Paris, but this technology is completely open. It's everywhere. And the objective that we're trying to get is we're saying we've created this project because we believe that in order to truly leverage the power of the blockchain, large institutions needs to come on board. They can't do that today because if they try to create a token or a currency, the effect of the volatility completely destroys its value. So they're using it for very important things. They're trying to improve it in terms of payments and stuff like that. But we're like, how can you use the power of the blockchain in order to improve the quality of life in a certain economy? Now, if you want to do that, you can use tokens to a certain extent. And we want to provide that solution to you because we're not just providing you with a private blockchain, we're providing you with smart tokenization. We provide you with a token which you can kind of specify what kind of functions you want, and we offer you a suite of services. So you can construct your token. But a lot of it depends on the volatility. If it becomes too volatile, then it's useless for them. They can't put it in a large economy. So this is the reason why we focus so much on this aspect of intrinsic value, because now we can go and tell them that, listen, we can give you a token and this is the base value, and based on the number of people that you got, you can start figuring out how much you want to price it at, right? And here's the math behind it. Here's, it's not something that we've come up with. And it makes a much more robust and economically feasible method of applying the blockchain, which is what the objective is.
Okay, sounds good. So actually, a few questions. Can you say that this tokenization, will it be like a robust part of our economy, of the world economy?
It's already happening. So I mean, increasingly, there's certainly a lot of nefarious actors in the economy today in terms of the crypto economics. So what it's showing us is, it's another stage of the evolution of the web. And Kevin Kelly said that yesterday when he was giving his speech over there. He called it the mesh. And essentially what he's saying is the entire world is going to have a mirror image in the virtual world. Well, the real world has got a lot of exchange of value. How are you going to do that in a completely virtual space? You need to have digitally native currency, which is able to do that, and that's what blockchain allows you to do. And with tokens, what it's actually doing is it's making a much more democratic investment model, which has not been the case till today. Today, it's always been in the hands of VCs and high net worth kind of individuals. So there's a much more democratic way of going about it. Hence the reason that we need to be able to come up with a nice structured way to be able to analyze and make investments, because Now the responsibility passes on to us. If you're going to be participating and you're using this democratic way of raising funds or investing money, how are you making that decision, right? And so you need some frame of reference, and that's what we're trying to provide. It's the first step in doing that, and I'm very proud of that work, yeah.
And you're probably very smart.
I pretend to be.
Okay. And what's actually your personal motivation to be active in this space? I mean, you could be, I don't know, you could go to academics or.
I used to be in academia. So I worked in academia. I was 2 steps away from doing a PhD. And I got very disgruntled with academia because you just, sit and do a lot of research, but then the bridge between application and business and doing the research it's very wide. So I wanted to do applied research, and that's why I got into this. My real motivation in blockchain actually goes back to my experience in the army. So I spent 5 years in the French Foreign Legion, and I spent 8 months in Afghanistan in a combat unit. And if you spend 8 months in a combat unit anywhere, trust me, it's going to have an effect on you.
What was your role?
I was in the parachutist regiment. I was a sniper. So I did that for a while. And when I was deployed in Afghanistan, when you're in these hostile kind of environments, at one point of time, you're going to ask yourself the question, what are you doing here? Why are you doing it? And every time I tried to get an answer to that, there was an economic reason behind it. And I didn't understand economics because I used to be an engineer before that. So I started studying about economics, went and got a business degree, realized that they don't teach you about this in a business degree. And was trying to figure out how does this capitalism engine work. In the process of understanding that, I wanted to get an alternative solution, and that's how I came across Bitcoin. I think it was 2012, 2013.
You invested it some?
A little bit, but my main obsession was, is this an alternative definition for the current rhetoric about capitalism? That was my motivation for it. And I started researching about it, wrote about it, published a few articles. Last year, I wrote my first book about it, which is called The Blockchain Alternative, in which I explored the concept of macroeconomics on a blockchain. And it's an introductory book. I didn't want to get into too much detail because I felt that the current narrative that we've got with blockchain is extremely focused on application, whereas I thought that more importance needs to be given towards implication. What would happen if you did this? How would you do monetary policy with it? Would it be a way to change fiscal policy? Because it's those things that have massive effects on society. And my obsession has always been sovereign debt levels. So that's the main area that I've been focusing on.
Is it democratizing actually the great people in the community, or is it also actually minimizing the income gap? For instance, I mean.
Okay, so the blockchain technology it's not a panacea, it's not going to solve all those kind of problems, but look at it this way. 5 years ago, or even 8 years ago, before the crisis happened, the number of people who were talking about economics and fintech and all those different kinds of subjects that's related to it was a very, very clustered group of people. Today, you can't go to a tech conference and not talk about this stuff, right? So there's obviously a greater education that's happening about it, and I think that's the first step in getting a large population to kind of focus their attention on this. More people get into it, the more people ideas get exchanged, so that's definitely a thing. The second aspect is the main problem with monetary policy is the fact that we have an expansionary monetary system. They pump more and more money inside, and it creates more and more debt. It reduces purchasing power. There's a host of issues that I can explain with that, but it's a very long explanation. The short version is, look at what they're doing right now with interest rates and with inflation policies, and look at what's happening in Japan, who's been doing the same thing for the past 20 years. And you can see it's like a canary in the gold mine. So if Europe thinks that Draghi's policies are going to have the beneficiary effects, well, you can check yourself by seeing what's happening in Japan, because that's our future if we carry on the same way that we do. It's very different in the US. Fractional banking is a big problem over there. The Basel IV regulations are coming up, and they're trying to control that to a certain extent. So just because you have a technology that offers transparency, more confidence, peer-to-peer, all those different good things, that doesn't mean that it's going to solve these structural issues. But transparency allows clarity, and clarity helps you get an answer. So that's kind of like the angle that I'm going with.
Yeah, in the end, maybe the community becomes more powerful than the powers that be. Idealistically, I don't know.
Idealistically, but that's my issue with the way that the blockchain space is evolving. On one side, you've got all these companies and these young entrepreneurs who are doing amazing work, and on the other side, you've got the existing system, which is extremely centralized. Now, because of the fact that they're so different, you've got regulators who are running in between the two, trying to kind of make sense of it. What I'm trying to say is we need to create a sovereign level blockchain, because then these two communities are sharing a similar infrastructure and a similar language, a certain jargon. Now you can start thinking about how can we go about using the blockchain to solve these huge issues. Because until and unless you do that, you're just creating two different spheres, and how are they going to interact?
Interesting talk. I mean, get this book, the blockchain alternative, and thank you very much for your interview, and all the best,
Thank you so
Kary.
much. Love to be
All
with you,
right.
Ram.
Okay. Thank you.
Take it easy.